All right, so here we go. This is session 5. So December 8th. And so tonight we are going to talk about scope. Does anyone have any idea about what scope is in terms of programming in JavaScript? Want to take a stab at it? You get free internet points.
I believe there was something known as a global scope and local scope, and it has to do with whatever is contained inside each scope itself.
Yes. So scope, and you're exactly right, Terrence. So scope is, and think of it just like you're looking through a scope, is what can you see? And so what part of my program can see other parts of the program? So in JavaScript, scope refers to where variables and functions are accessible in your code. Global scope is any variable declared outside of a function is going to be in the global scope. You can access these variables anywhere in the program. Local scope is anything defined inside of a function and is only accessible in that function, and any functions or blocks of code inside it. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll take a look here at the. So right now, if I say let name equal Charles, this is at the global scope, right? And so what I can do is I can now declare a method or a function. So I can say const hello. Right. And so this method can see what's going on outside of it, right? So notice I didn't have to do like name and then put Charles down here. So if I get rid of this, this will still work. So I still get hello Charles. But if I come outside of the method and I say console.log name, now I get a reference error. It says name is not defined because this console.log is at the global scope and it's looking for other things at the global scope. And so same thing here is now that I'm in my local scope, if I don't pass anything in here, I still get the same thing. Name is not defined. So I'm basically passing an undefined into here. So let's see here. So we can do that. And now global scope is, so now we can see like my console.log works and my method works. I'm at the global scope. And you can also see that I consoled out because my console.log, even though it's written underneath the method, it's still written above the function call. So the computer comes in, it says, okay, let's declare this variable. So let name is declaring the variable. And then we assign the variable, the value of Charles. Comes in, it pulls my method into memory and it's holding it in memory. And now it says console.log my name. And so basically it spits out Charles. Then it comes down here and now we actually call the method and then it comes back up here and it executes this code that's inside the method. So we kind of see the computer is going to read from left to right, from top to bottom. And so it's going to execute each line of code as it hits it. And this line of code is basically just telling it that there's some code here. It's not telling it to do anything. We're not telling it to do anything until we get down to here with the function call. So where we can get into issues with global scope is that, let's see here, I should be able to do, right? So here we go. I assign the value of name to Charles. This method is going to reassign the value of name to the number 13 instead of the string of Charles. I come down here, I hit my first console.log, that spits out Charles. I then run my method and it changes it from Charles to 13. And then I console.log my name a second time. And this time it actually spits out the 13. And so, do you have a
I'm
question?
just following this thing.
So with that, we can kind of start to see why like global scope is actually dangerous, right? So because what happens when I want to do basically things can change it without me knowing it, right? And so if I had done change string to number and we call change string to number, and then I write another method down here that says this. So I'm thinking that maybe I'm going to get my name, but somewhere else in my program, my name has been changed to the number 13. Right? I may not know why I'm getting this. And it's pretty obvious because it's right here. But if you came into a piece of code and all you saw was this, and you keep hitting run and you just keep getting 13 over and over again, it can get really confusing. And so that's why we talk about like global scope can be useful for passing information around the application, but you always want to limit your scope. You want your scope, whenever possible, you want your scope to be local. You don't want it to be global. And because again, something like this where there's two methods is one thing, but if you came in here and this class was, or this file was 500 lines long and you had 30 or 40 different methods in here and all the variables were all shared by all of them at the top of the page, and something goes wrong, it becomes very difficult to track down where the bad stuff is happening. So also name is a very bad variable name for the number 13, right? So and we don't want to do that. And so we could say global name, and we could return my name to local name, local name. So now no matter what we do to global name, change it to 13, do whatever else we want to, first off I'll get an error because again name is not defined. And so get rid of that. Right? So now global name is Charles. We can still modify it. We change it to 13, but return my name is now based on a local name. and it has to be fed in here. And same thing. So if I now outside of return my name, so that local name is a variable that is only visible, local scope only visible in here. So if I try and do console.log local name and I hit the run button, I get local name is not defined because it's not defined at the global scope. And that was kind of a couple of different ways to say the same thing, but scope is something that you will run across, and it's something that it can be tricky while you're getting the hang of it. All right, so so again, kind of the same thing. Inside function, say my age, let age equal 25. You only have access to the age variable within say my age function. So if you try to do a console log age down here, you'll get that undefined error message. All right. The other concept that we want to talk about tonight is called hoisting. And this one can definitely be confusing. And what it's talking about is basically in JavaScript, there's a mechanism that exists where variables and function declarations are moved to the top of their scope before code execution, right? And so what's happening here is if you write this is what's actually happening. And so notice, oops, let's do this. We'll go back here. Let's go ahead and comment all of this out. So if I do console.log hoisted name, and then I say let hoisted name equal Ben, and then I do console.log hoisted name. Okay, so in Replit, I think this is a issue with the environment that it's running in. Basically, this is throwing an error saying that you cannot access it. And I don't know if JavaScript has changed since they created this slide, but what the slide is trying to illustrate is that you actually end up with this. And did I, whoops. This, which I think you would see if you run it in a normal IDE, is you get that undefined, right? Because when we do let hoisted name equal Ben, there is the declaration and the assignment is two operations at once. And you don't always need to assign something to a variable when you declare it. So you can declare it and not assign it anything, and the computer knows that the variable is there. And then you can come down here and assign it at a later time. And if you're outside of the Replit, like if you're in VS Code or another IDE, you should be able to run console.log hoisted name, and it's going to see that it's basically just undefined until you actually give it a value. I'm pretty sure that is it for tonight as far as what we need to talk about. So just be hopping into the challenges at this point. Now, are there any questions that I can answer about scope and hoisting? Anybody? Okay, we just want to get into the challenges.
Yes.
Just get into the challenges. All right. So have we been enjoying the format where I kind of do like I lead one and then we break out into the teams and do one? We can do that again tonight, or do we want to try and switch it up to something else? Like, you guys just want to dive into one?
I prefer you go first.
Yeah, I think it's been working best already.
Okay. Yep. I'm good with that. I can kind of illustrate some of the concepts that we'll be dealing with tonight, and then we'll get into it. All right. So I'll take the lead on this one. So we're going to do sum of negatives. And so we're going to write a method which takes in an array of integers and returns the sum of only the negative integers in the array. All right. Let's do this. Do this whole thing. All right, so right, we know basically we've got one parameter coming in, right, which is going to be an array of numbers. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yep.
And we're going to basically do some math in here, and we're going to spit out one number. So if we do some pseudo coding here, so I know that basically I have an array of numbers coming into the method. I need to iterate through each of the elements in the array. What logic check am I looking for? When am I going to take action and when am I not going to take action?
When there's a negative involved.
Okay, I will use control flow logic to determine if a number is negative. If the number is negative, I will keep a cumulative total. If the number is positive, I will disregard it. Return the total of all negative numbers. Does that sound like that's pretty much what we're driving at here?
Yep.
All right. So again, let's look at so there's a term in coding called fail fast, fail often. So let's make sure that I can print out my variable so that I know it's coming into the method correctly. It looks like it is. So how do I want to iterate through this array of numbers?
A loop.
Okay, right, a for loop. And what are my three parts of a for loop?
The variable, the
Index.
So where to start counting, when to stop counting, and what to count by, right?
Yes.
right.
So those are like the three things that I need to tell my for loop to do. So I'm telling it to start counting at 0. I'm going to tell it to keep counting as long as it's the number, the total count is less than the total length of my array, and I'm going to count by ones. So now we can go ahead and let's make sure that we're looping through our array. So I've got num array, and I'm going to do box I, right? So I is going to keep incrementing, and I want to, access my array by index value, right? So 3, -1, -9, 2. So there, that looks like those are all the elements in my array. Now, because I need to keep a total, I'm going to need something to hold that total. So let's say let total of negatives equals 0. We'll start it off there. All right. So we talked about step 3. I will use controlful logic to determine if the number is negative. Anyone want to take a stab at writing this line with me?
It would be an if statement where if the number is less than 0.
Yep. So how do I, what's the notation I use for the number that I'm looking at? All right, I just deleted it. We were console.logging it.
If numerator box I.
Yep. If numerate box I is less than 0, what do I want to do?
Console log it.
Not console log it. So step 4, if the number is negative, I will keep a cumulative total. So again, this is shorthand. So and I believe because it's a negative, I want to, I'm just trying to think of my math operations here. I'm going to add it. So plus will concat 2 things together or add 2 numbers, but plus equal will do it cumulatively, basically. So when I do this, I'm now going to say that I want you to take 0 and I want you to add -9 to it, which should give me -9. And I don't really need an else case in this because if it's a positive number, I don't want it to do anything, right? So you don't always have to have an else case. So let's see here. There's my if, there's my loop. And so now let's go ahead and console.log total negatives. Right, and there's -10. And so I had a -1 and a -9. And if I said 72, 43, 99, and -20, I would hope that this number would change to -30. And there we go. Right, and now I want to take this out of the console.log and I want to return it. And so now, again, we can't see this, but we can do console.log right, and now when I do this, I would expect that I would return true, right? So here we go. And so with this, again, this is probably one of the first if statements we wrote that there wasn't an else case to it, and which is perfectly fine. It's common when you don't have a need for the number. So like if we change the problem to basically if it's a negative number, add it to the total, and if it's a positive number, multiply the total by the positive number, then we would need an else case that then handles the other part of the math. But with this, it's basically if it's negative, add it up. If it's not negative, just completely disregard it. And so just to make sure that we're on the right track here, we can do one with out any negative numbers, and we would hope that it returns 0 and we get that true again. All right, so any questions about how I worked through this, how I made my decisions to get where we were at? All right, so it is 6:42, and let's go ahead and look at this next one. Let me fork it. All right, so the next one is largest error. Arrays and loops is what we're going to be working with. So write a function that takes in a list of incorrect numbers and a correct number. Return the incorrect number furthest away from the correct number. So let's think about this one a little bit. Excuse me. How many parameters are coming into this method?
Looks like 2.
Yep, 2.
Correct and incorrect number.
Yep. So what is incorrect numbers? Is it a number or is it something else?
List.
Yep, it's an array. So I think that's a list in Python. So, but yeah, so it's an array. So we've got array of incorrect numbers. And then the second parameter is number, which is equal to the correct number, right? And we're only going to output one thing. So the output is just a number. Holy cow. All right, so in this, so we've got a incorrect number array that includes 3, 6, and -10, and the correct number is 0. So we need to know absolute distance between the two numbers. So -10 is a distance of 10 away, right? And so in this instance, the second one, we've got 3, 6, -10 again, but we have -9. And so that's really close to -10, furthest away from the largest positive number, 6. All right, so you are going to need a loop to iterate through this, and you're going to need to look at some some control flow logic and compare the correct number against the array of incorrect numbers. Let's see. So we have tonight 11 people. So we can do 2 teams of 4 and a team of 3, if that works out okay for everyone. All right. So
Yeah,
let me go ahead.
I have a question really fast. Yeah, what is an incorrect number?
It's kind of written weird, but it's not incorrect in any format. Basically, you're just giving it an array of numbers and then a single number, and you want to find the number that is furthest away from in the array that from the separate number that you gave it, right? So, and it's got wrong nums and correct num, and so I mean, there's nothing wrong about them per se, right? Like it's not a anything like that. So don't let the wording fool you.
All right, yeah, I
Is
get
it
it.
like
Yeah.
an order?
Yeah, and again, and also the order in the array shouldn't matter either, because like if I then say like 1 and throw a -40 up here, -40 is by far like the furthest number away from 0. So the numbers don't have to necessarily be in order. So you don't have to worry about that part. You'll just want to iterate through the array and check it against all of them. All right, so let me go ahead and stop the recording, or pause the.
All right, so this is the max error one, and pretty much all of the groups were able to solve it or get very close to a solution. This is an interesting one because this is going to require the use of a loop it's going to require the use of a control flow, and it's going to require the use of a built-in method from the math module. So let's go ahead and work our way through this one real quick. So again, looking at some pseudocode here. Oops, sorry. I am receiving an array of numbers and a number to compare the elements in the array to. All right. And then I need to locate the number in the array that is furthest away from the correct number. Because I am dealing with both positive and negative numbers, I need to know the absolute distance between the numbers. We'll then return the wrong number that is furthest away. Okay, so just looking through just looking at this method, kind of what I've got going on, I know that I've got two different parameters coming in. Right, and that I need to compare them against each other. So again, let's take baby steps here and make sure that I'm able to access what I think I can access inside here. Right, so I've got those. All right, now I know that I need to iterate. So I know that I'm going to use a for loop. So for, and let I, and I know I'm going to start counting from the very first index position. So I'm going to do 0. And I know that I want to keep counting for the length of my array. I want to count every single element in the array. So again, where do I start counting? Why do I stop counting? And what do I count by? So I less than long nums. So that's my array, that length. And I want to count by 1, so I plus plus. All right, so let's go ahead and move my console.log into here. And let's make sure that I can access each of the elements in my wrong nums array. All right, so 3, 6, negative 10. Okay, so that is, I'm good to go through here. Any questions on anything that I've done so far? Okay, so I know that I need to have a variable that will hold my result. So let's go we'll just call it furthest, and we'll call it 0. It's a neutral number for right now, and we'll be assigning it something different. Now, and again, what I say is if you don't understand a problem, always build it out in the smallest steps that you understand it, right? So I know that I need to go through my array and I need to iterate, or I need to hit all of the elements in wrong nums, right? I need to do 3, 6, negative 10. Now, what do I want to do with this number? Anyone want to help me with that? What's the stated goal of this method or this function?
It says to locate the furthest number in the array.
Yep. So locate the furthest number in the array, right? So to get that, I need the distance between the two. So I need to take my correct number, or my correct num, and subtract wrong nums from it, right? So now I've got -3, -6, and 10. Now here is so this first one would pass, no problem, already as it is. But where we get into issues is if I throw in -6 here, right? So now I've got -6 and 6. Which one of these is a further distance from 0? Right, so I can go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or I can do 0, -1 up to -6. These two numbers are the same distance from 0. But if I'm only going for the largest number, so the largest distance, I'm trying to compare, this number is larger mathematically than this number. And I can make it even more confusing by changing the 6 to 7, right? So now -7 is a 1 unit of distance further away, but without normalizing for negative values, 6 is still the largest number in this array, mathematically speaking. So this is where my built-in method comes in, right? So now I know that I need to do the math.abs, and to do that, sorry, come on, Zoom, get out of my way. Oh, that was interesting. Right, if I search for a JS absolute value, I get math.abs, math.abs, function returns the absolute value of a number. That is, it returns x if x is positive, or 0 and the negation of x if x is negative, right? So it doesn't matter if it's -7 or 7. If I feed that into math ABS, I'm going to get 7. It basically normalizes for those negatives being in there. So here, nope, that was the previous one, largest error. So now if I do math ABS, and I still need the ABS of basically these two numbers, right? So now when I run this, look what happens. Now 7 is my largest number, even though prior to this, it was -7. Now, what am I comparing this against?
You're comparing it against the second parameter, correct? No?
No, we've already got correct num in here. So now I'm comparing it against my current furthest number, right? Which I just defaulted to 0. Yeah, because the only time I'd ever get 0 is if I did 0 and, or like the same number, right? So if I did like 3 and 3, 3, and they don't really, you can add extra code to protect for this, but it's not part of this problem. Like now I would have all zeros and this number would never update. But that it doesn't ask you to solve for a situation like that, right? And so, sorry, I need to basically assign this value. If it is larger than this value, that needs to become my new furthest. And so notice how I've gone from basically just console.log, wrong nums, I, to right? And so notice how I'm just taking small iterative steps here, right? Like I know that I'm going to be iterating through all of the elements of wrong numbers. I know that I need to find the distance between the correct number and each of the wrong numbers. I know that I need the absolute value between these two. And so now what I need to do is basically pry this out of the console.log here. And so now I'm ready for my if statement. So if this right here is greater than my current furthest number, then furthest is equal to and so remember, we're not putting in the distance, so it's not asking me to return the distance. So it says write a function that takes in a list of incorrect numbers and a correct number, return the incorrect number furthest away. So it's not asking me to return the distance of the number that's furthest away. It's just asking me to return the number that is furthest away. So I need to make sure that my furthest then gets assigned to the actual number. And that's what I want to spit out at the end of this. All right, so there's my if statement. I don't need an else for this because if it's not, it just goes away and I skip over it and I go to the next one. So now if I return furthest, and I'll also just console.log it just for, so we see it over in the terminal. Right, I would expect that the number 7 would be my furthest number away for this first one. And because I changed these, that would be false still, but we'll change that to 7, right? So there's 7 and there's true. And same thing if I do the same thing for this one, right? There's 6, there's true. So does everyone kind of see how I built this out one step at a time, right? So I came in, I console.logged wrong numbers, I console.logged correct number minus wrong number. I then noticed that I need to correct for absolute value with negative numbers. So I add my built-in, and then I know that I need to take this formula right here and only take action if it's bigger than my existing furthest, right? And then if it is bigger than my existing furthest, it now becomes my furthest. And at the end of the day, once it's looped through everything, it'll come down here and return the one that is furthest away. How do we feel about that?
Can you explain that math absolute part again?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just go ahead and comment this out for right now. And so if so math dot, or let's do this, let example equal -7, right? And let num1, we'll do this, num1, num2 equal 13, right? So the absolute value of a number, just like math, even outside of programming, like if you're looking at a normal math book, I think this is kind of like absolute values is probably like 5th, 6th, 7th grade, somewhere in there. So long time ago for all of us, absolute value is just the value without a negative or positive in front of it. And so if I then do console.log math.abs num1, what I would expect to see is that it would return 7. And if I do 2, it's going to return 13, right? And same thing. So if I did num1 minus num2, if I take it outside of this, like I would expect that's negative 20, right? So there's negative 20. But when I put it in here, I get 20, right? So it doesn't matter if it is a negative or a positive, it is just going to return the positive. And that's what absolute value does.
Got it. I think I kind of got it. It makes more sense.
Okay. All right. And then, so that would kind of be it for this one, unless you have any more specific questions as to what I did with it. All right, so let's take a look here. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a quick 5-minute break here. And I'm going to pause the recording. We'll come back. We can take a look at doing another one together, and then we'll split and do another one as groups. So I'm going to pause recording, and I'll see everyone back at about 7:52 Central Time. Back on. Share my screen. Can you see the screen that I'm on right now? I'm highlighting stuff.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I shared the right monitor. Excellent. So, and one other thing that I wanted to touch on real quick here before moving on is, so we've been using a lot of for loops, and that is 100% fine. Like you're going to use a lot of for loops, but there is always the ability to do these as a built-in, a for each. So if we were going to do this as a for each, again, this is a built-in method. So I could come to wrong nums and do dot for each. And for each uses what's called a callback function. So you see that right here. And we're basically going to take every element of the wrong nums array and feed it through this callback function as a parameter. So I could call this wrong num. And then again, that fat arrow tells me that I'm going to be doing this as a callback function. And so we could do the same thing. So if math.abs correct num minus, now instead of wrong nums I, like we would access like we were doing a for loop, we're actually just going to use wrong num here. And let's see, we need to, let's say greater than furthest. And then we just need to do furthest is equal to wrong num, which is that. And so we should still get the same answers here, right? So we get 7 and 6 and true. So this, which again, this is a little overly wordy because I left my different console.log notes in here. But if I do this, and I'll put them back in, but this is basically doing the exact same thing as this. And when you look at existing code, like you're just as likely to see this as you would be to see something like this. And you just need to know that if you ever see something, you see a for each and you don't understand it, just know that you're working with a built-in for loop. So let me put that back in. I'll go ahead and comment this out, and then I'll move this down here. All right. So let's take a look at the next one here. All right, so this one is called range. And again, we're going to be dealing with arrays and loops. So I've got a range generator, and I need to write a method that takes in a minimum and a maximum integer and return an array of all the integers in between in ascending order. Right, so if I put in range gen 3 and 7, that means that I need to return an array that is 4, 5, and 6. -4 and 1 would be -3, -2, -1, 0. All right, so is this inclusive or exclusive of the min and max?
Exclusive.
Right, exclusive. So 3 isn't in here, 7 isn't in here. So we need to grab all the numbers in between, not including them. So when I take a look at this, I've got is 2 params, both numbers, right? I've got my min and I've got my max. So let's go ahead and grab this and this. Yeah. And let's change these to these. Should get false, false. All right. So if we look at pseudo coding this, I am all right. Does this look like a pretty solid plan to everyone?
It does.
All right, so let's go ahead and start working through this step by step. So first thing I always do is identify my parameters, then I write my pseudocode, then I'm going to make sure that I actually have access to what's coming in here. All right, so I've got my 3, 7, and my -4 and 1. So 3, 7, -4 and 1. All right, so that looks good. So now I know that I need a empty array to hold all of my results. All right, and I know that I'm going to want to loop through with my min and max as my counts and use that to perform an action over and over again while I basically add each element to the array. So if I do, let's see here, where do I want to start my count?
And
Sorry, what's that?
at the first perimeter, min.
All right, yep, at min. And then I want to keep counting while I is less than max, right? And we want to count by ones. And let's see what happens when we console.log I. All right, so in this first one, we count at 3 and we stop counting at 6. So do we want to start right at min?
Min +1.
All right, so now we're starting at 4, ending at 6. Now we're starting at -3, ending at 0. So that looks a little bit better, right? So how do I add an element to an array?
Push.
Yeah, so, and we'll probably need to iterate on this. So if I do push I, what does push do?
It'll add it to the end, right?
Yep, it'll add it to the end. So my guess is when I run this, I'll probably have an array with reverse numbers. So now let's go ahead and turn this console.log back on and let's do results array. All right, so we've got 4, 5, 6, 3, -2, 1, 0. So that is actually correct. So why are we getting false? Oh, duh. Anyone want to tell me why we're getting false?
Sending order, so maybe it's the other way around.
Nope.
It's not exactly. It's not strictly equal to.
Nope, they are. I'm forgetting something.
The first and last perimeter.
Nope.
The range of all the numbers.
What am I returning from my method?
Oh yeah, you're not returning anything.
Yep. Oh, result array. Okay, so I've still got false, false. So what exactly, why am I losing my mind here?
I really do think it is the strictly equal signs.
I'm also seeing it's adding the spacing around it. No, that's the same. So Why do I feel like I'm missing something very basic here?
Can you force types in JavaScript?
You can, but there should be like a to array. Array to. Let me just check one thing here real quick, because I will fully admit I'm stumped as to why I would be getting false. And my guess is that it probably has something to do with something very simple that I'm overlooking.
And again, like full noob at JavaScript here, but is it potentially passing the reference to the array? And since they're different arrays, that's why it's not equal?
It could be something like that, where it's basically looking at two different memory blocks. Let's see here. No. Let me check out why that is the case. I'll have to do a little bit of research on it. Sorry about that, but or wait.
You're on the previous
okay.
problem.
Sorry, that makes way more sense. Sorry about that. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, I think there's probably something going on with some sort of equality issue, but at this point, I would consider this solved. And I don't know why it's doing that, probably why there wasn't any tests in there in the first place. But I mean, we are spitting out the array 4, 5, 6 like we should. We're splitting out -3 through 0. So let's go ahead and move to the next one. And this one I may have to ask someone else as to why that was breaking if I can't find the answer on a Google search. But I mean, worst comes to worst, I should have an answer for everyone in class by tomorrow as to why it would do that. And it's probably going to be something under the hood. All right, so that was range. All right, so for the last one, we are going to do the challenge called initials. All right, and so what this is saying is write a method that takes in a string of your full name and return your initials as a string in all uppercase. So Michael Jordan would become MJ, Elon Musk would become EM, Michael Gary Scott would become MGS. All right, so does anyone want to take a stab at some of the building blocks that we're going to need to complete this?
Well,
So it's giving us a split method right there. So that's number one.
Yep. So
Then we're going to have to use the uppercase method as well.
Yep, so split to uppercase. How are we going to go through each of the words in here once we split it?
And using the for loop.
There you go, the old trusty, right? So, all right. So that sounds like we've got a grasp on where to start with this. I'm going to stop the recording here real quick. Okay. And, all right. That. Okay. So again, what this comes down to is taking baby steps. And like I said, just moving through this slowly and getting one thing done at a time instead of trying to jump straight to the end. So I know that I'm going to need something to hold my initials. I saw some people attempt it as an array, which you could have done, and then you have to do a dot join at the end, or you can do it as a string. And we know that we need to split the string, a full name, into an array. So when I do, oops, got it there. So if I console.log my array, right? So there I've got Michael and Jordan. And what I usually recommend doing is adding one step at a time until you're really comfortable with everything. So I can get rid of this and I can start my for loop. And what I'm going to do is console.log array I. And now it should spit out all of the different names as individual elements in here. And so then I know that I need the first character, so you can do that box 0, right, and get it that way. I used a built-in, I did the char at, right, and this does the exact same thing. So it's however you want to tackle it, right, but I'm handling it one thing at a time. And I know I can basically create my array. I make sure that I'm seeing my array, it's doing what I expect. I want to loop through my array, and then I want to see all of the elements in my array. And then I want to get the first letter of each element in my array. And then kind of lastly here, I want to do the 2 uppercase. And there's that. And so now I've got everything I'm looking for, but these are still each individual elements in the array. So I can break this out of my console.log, and I can basically concatenate it by doing the plus equal. So I get the cumulative values added into my initial string, and then I can return this, and all my falses turned true, right? So again, like each problem that I work through tonight, it's you take the baby step, like look at each part, make sure each individual part's working before you take the next step. Because if you take 3 steps and it doesn't work, you then have to question all 3 of those steps, right? And so we want to do our first step, make sure that it works. And if it doesn't work, we want to fix that first step. And then we want to take the second step, make sure that it works, do all the fiddling. And so when and even in my day-to-day work, I try not to change 2 things at the same time, unless I'm really sure about what I'm doing. And so, because as soon as I change 2 things at the same time, let alone 3, 4, 5 things, when it doesn't do what I expect it to do, it just becomes that much more complicated to figure out what went wrong. All right, so it is 8:50. We've done pretty much all of the challenges for the night. The next challenge kind of on the list is going to be a longer one. We can cover that tomorrow when we start class, kind of as the warm-up one, and we'll walk through that as a group. Were there any other questions, anything else that we wanted to talk about right now before we break for the evening? Okay. Well, if no one has any questions about anything that we covered for the night, then I will push up into Slack all of the challenges that we worked on, as well as all the notes. And then once I stop the final recording here, it processes it to my computer. I'll upload it to Code Platoon, and then Tom Preet will put it up on the YouTube channel and post it in the Intro to Coding tomorrow sometime. And just quick reminder, Tom will be speaking to all of us tomorrow at the beginning of class, and he will have deeper insight into the current application process and what it's like to be a student at Code Platoon.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording.